You can start by taking everything out of the box. There's 4 hydraulic hoses, a bracket, the valve body, some electronics, and some hydraulic fittings. Today we are installing a Summit third function kit on a 2021 Kubota L3301. Start by pulling the 4 plugs out of the bottom of the solenoid and taking off the chunk of cardboard that protects the mating surface with the valve block. Grab the 4 Allen bolts and go ahead and throw them into the slots. Once the screws are in, you want to align the P with the extra hole on the valve body shown here. Once the 2 are lined up, go ahead and drop the solenoid on top of the valve body. Then tighten the screws up with a 5/32 Allen. I tightened them down till they were all even and then gave them a final torque. All the holes on the valve body have letters designating what goes in what port. The first 2 that we're going to put in are these ones that have an O-ring on just one side, and the O-ring goes towards the valve body. The letters for these 2 ports are P and T. I believe the instructions call for some sort of lubricant on these. You can probably use hydraulic oil. We used WD-40 because it was handy. Once those 2 are hand tight, you want to grab a 7/8 wrench and give them a snug. They need to be tight, but they don't need to be super tight. You can always tighten them extra if they leak when you go to test it. For the other 2 ports on the valve body, we're going to install these double-sided male fittings. Each side has an O-ring, so they can go in either way. Same story on this side. You want to tighten them as far as you can by hand, and then give them a snug with the 7/8 again. Now we're going to take 2 male quick disconnect fittings and install those on the exposed threads on the valve body. The wrench to tighten these is 1 1/16. We just snugged these up without putting the valve body in a vise or anything, just holding it by hand, and they didn't leak, so it looks like that's plenty tight. Now we're going to mount the bracket to the tractor. To do this, we're going to first unbolt the existing valve body bracket, which is located on the right-hand side of the tractor, right underneath the joystick for the loader. The 2 bolts are 17 millimeters. Take off the 2 bolts from the factory bracket, slide in the new bracket, and tighten the bolts back up. Grab the 2 screws from the bag and grab the valve body. Put the 2 screws through the bracket that we just put on and attach the valve body with the quick disconnects facing up.
Alright, so on your hydraulic manifold here, there will be multiple hoses. Make sure you read the directions. If you already have a rear hydraulic kit or a backhoe, you'll be using a different port. For us, we'll be using this top left one. Once again, read your directions, don't rely on us, but you'll be taking this top port, disconnecting it here. It runs up top to the valve on the loader assembly. So you'll take this end and it'll go into one of the ports here, and then out the other port into the loader assembly. We'll link this into the tractor circuit. 7/8 inch wrench. Alright, now that we're connected down here, this connection is still loose, so we can get everything in place before we snug it. We'll be connecting to the P port on this assembly. Alright, now that we have it in place, this is where you're going to want to Make sure the hose is routed how you would like it routed. You can tuck it away. I would keep it in line with the other ones. And now we'll snug it down. So we'll now be taking from this port here into the other available port on the bottom of the valve unit.
When you go to remove this hose, there's a reusable zip tie that you need to take off. Now attach the other hose loosely on this first end, and then go ahead and tighten it on the second end. Make sure your cable's routed correctly, and then tighten up the first end. Alright, short disclaimer here. When we assembled this in the video, we actually did it backwards. You want the side of the fitting that has the O-ring facing towards the quick disconnect that goes to the implement. Place the two fittings with the nuts through the bracket and tighten them down. Next, grab the U-bolt and its hardware and take the bracket over to the tractor. It's time to install it. It ended up being such a tight fit we had to take one of the nuts off. You'll need a 14mm socket and a 14mm wrench to tighten it down. The two nuts on the bottom work as a stop, and then the two nuts on the top side of the plate tighten against those. It's kind of a pain, and you gotta slowly tighten it and wiggle it in place and tighten it some more. And then when you go to install the quick disconnects for the implement, make sure to put those on the side that has the O-ring. In the video, we're installing it on the wrong side, the side that doesn't have the O-ring. Now you install the two remaining female quick disconnects on the O-ring end of the long hoses. Route the two ends of the hose that don't have the quick disconnects down the side of the loader, and then tighten them up. These were tricky to tighten because of the fact that they clamp in the middle. At this point, all the hoses are connected and we can move on to the electronics. First thing we need to do is remove the ball from the end of the loader control arm. It was a formidable opponent, and we ended up defeating it with some big channel locks and then hitting it with a wrench. Then take off the rubber boot and feed all of the cable and the plug for the control switch back through the rubber and then through the hole where the loader arm comes out of. Then you can slide the rubber back on and put the new knob on the end of the control arm. If you don't like the position of the buttons, you can take the faceplate off and rotate them before the handle is attached. Once the orientation is correct, you can go ahead and tighten it down. And then we'll plug in the two connectors. I don't remember which one went to which, so check the instructions. The wiring harness also has a positive and negative that go to the battery. We opted to purchase a little bit of cable sheathing, so we go ahead and slide our cable through that. Once the cable's through the sheathing, go ahead and separate the two wires. Strip off a little bit of copper on both ends. Then I'm just using a set of crimp-on automotive terminals to connect to the battery. My hand was blocking the shot, but essentially we loosen up the nuts and go ahead and throw on our new cables and tighten them back down. Now the final thing we need to do is connect these two quick disconnect fittings. After this, we threw some zip ties on the cables just to keep them grouped together. Here's the final routing of the two cables. And here's what the electronic valve assembly looks like all finished up. Here's what the new joystick knob looks like. The top button opens, the bottom button closes. After running a new implement for the first time, it's always a good idea to double check that your hydraulic oil level is still good. And there you have it. The new grapple worked great. We just had to turn around those two fittings that we had marked backwards earlier in the video, and we were good to go.